Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday, and we're back finally after being away for the summer. I hope some of you have behaved yourself and painted a little bit. We're going to do seashell drawing and painting, and we're going to work on this Wednesday as well as next Wednesday. So I'm going to get started here, and the first task you're going to have is to select 10 to 12 seashells. You may end up going back. Now here I just didn't realize I had grabbed two of the same kind. Never mind that one. I just picked up seashells, if you can see these, and I do have two scallop shells, and I honestly don't know the name of all these. So when I lay them on the page, obviously I'm going to need a few more. This is not my arrangement. This is not how I do the arrangement, but I do think about where I want my larger and darker shapes. So sometimes I'll do a little bit of a play. And I have developed lots and lots of these seashell paintings. So heavier seashells, I tend to want to balance with other heavy seashells, but sometimes I want to put things at the bottom that are heavy. Now, after I just play like this, I know that I can run and get some more seashells. Today, I'm only going to get about halfway done, or even a third or fourth of the way done, just to give you an idea how to start and how to design. When we design, what we want to do is and there's a little sand. Okay, so you could, if you were uncomfortable with maybe drawing, you could trace, but I don't think you have to worry about that with seashells. This is how I get started. I think I need to go a little darker here so you can see my lines. So when I'm doing my seashells, the truth is, what I do is I usually just lay the seashell down, and I begin by sketching. Now I'm making this one close to the same size that I actually see, but sometimes I make things larger or smaller than what I see. And to tell you the truth, I often sketch something and then I go right ahead and paint it. I can go just into the zone of drawing and sketching and painting, but just to help you along, I'm going to say, okay, that's how I would get started. Now, I almost wish I had made this perimeter a little larger, but I guess I can live with this shape. Okay, then I kind of come along and I sketch the next seashell. And I just simply observe those shapes, and here's another little thing that might help you as well. If I know that I want the shell to, now I'm making this one a little bit bigger.
If your hair gets in it.
Oh, I did that, didn't I? Thank you. Hey, Marie. So say that again.
Her head was in the way.
Maybe what I need to do,
I can't see the...
Zig, maybe I can make this a little darker and see if you can see it better. And the other thing is that maybe if you need to see better, you could come up closer.
See what she's doing?
Yeah.
The other thing is...
Much better.
That's better.
Okay, so let me just scoot this so that the image is larger. Okay, good. That does help. So as long as I don't stick my head in the way again. So I do the drawing before I actually do the painting. And I want to design, and when we design, we have to think about the positive and negative spaces. So the negative spaces in this design are going to be the white spaces around it. Now, I can show you that texture can be added to the background, splatter, for example, or washes to make it look like the sand. If, for instance, that would be something you would want to do. I got that a little crooked. So my body wants to move on top of this, and I'm not letting it go there. Okay. So I also am going to think about the lights and the shadows. So when I'm all done, I'm going to decide if say for instance, you see how the shadow is on this actual shell right here. And that's because there is light overhead and it is creating that shadow. If I want to go ahead and reproduce the shape of that shadow, then I'll just make a little drawing here. There will not be much of a shadow on this shell, however, because that edge is so flat next to the table, next to the surface here. So I'm just going to continue. So my next is this. That's not a cat's paw. What is this shell called? Does anybody know what this shell is called? No, I think a cat's paw, it does have, that's not, well, maybe it's a form, maybe there's different kinds. So there are ridges along here, and I do draw basically what I see, which sometimes can be kind of funny because this is all white, and what it has is just the shadows. And so sometimes you find yourself just indicating where those shadows. Now, after I sketch this, I still need to reference this shell to get the painting done. I have that to look at. Where do I go next? Oh, you know what I did is I started here and I'm just building around this. So was that my focal point? It might have been. Had I started with this one, I knew I was going to put it down here because it's a bigger shell. Well, let me draw this one. This one has a lot of challenges because which way do we really want to do the shell? That might be more interesting from that perspective. So I think we're trying to build something beautiful. It's like we're writing a story, and in that story we have different characters. I'm just making this up as I go along, sorry. But we want them to all relate to each other. We want them to be in unity. So I guess that the reason these all have something in common is that they're all seashells and they all came from the sea, and they're beautiful, made from nature. I used to say that everything is either made by God or made by man. And then I thought, well, everything is made by God, isn't it? No matter what. Okay, so although somebody said, well, plastic furniture is not something God made. You're right, okay. All right. So I design based on what I see. Now, the other challenge that you're going to have, following the contour of the shell is going to help to give it the three-dimensional, and also creating the shadows. And I don't typically shade where my shadows are going to be, but that's just going to help me there to define that shell. And I just have to put it back in the right direction to, there's a little bit of a shadow there. Okay, so let's just say I keep building I'll just put this one here. I just keep building, and I don't want to leave a lot of space. I like the fact that these two were almost touching, and this is this, so I'm deciding right now that I don't need that one so far away. I'm going to put it closer. So I'll simply just add that curve, because this is the curve that's there, and it has a really dark shadow. And then that, I think this is an olive shell. Yeah. I used to know some of the names of these shells, and lots of these were picked up on the beach here in Sarasota, but some came from South Carolina and I think the Outer Banks. So if you have your own seashells, they become kind of special to you. I'm correcting my shape just a little bit here. And again, drawing the contour will help to give the three-dimensional feeling to that shell. All right, so I could keep going. I love doing these little, oh my goodness, these scallop shells. They are quite beautiful. I'm gonna try to stop and start painting after this one. As you can tell, it's not easy to stop just with a sketch. And as I said before, I often sketch and then start painting. I mean, I sketch and then I paint, then I sketch, then I paint, then I sketch. So that's fun, but sometimes it's a little safer to go ahead and get all your sketching done. Now, this is interesting because most of these shells that have these ridges I might need to correct myself right here. They're going to fan out. Okay, so if they're fanning like a fan, you know, they're wider out here, and so they get tighter as they come toward the middle. So let's just say that you would want to make the middle line, this is just a tip and some advice, and sometimes I redraw this just to get it right. But this is a scallop shell, and oddly enough, when I draw and paint, I do like to be accurate and pretty true, and I don't think I fanned this one out quite as much as it should be. There, that's a little more like it, and the same here. So I think this is a great lesson in design, because you have to plan. It's not just about planning, it's mostly about being intuitive with your design. So obviously I have a lot more to do on this page, but I'm going to start painting. So I'm going to have to, should I zoom back a little to show my palette, or should I just?
Yes, here, wait a minute. Up. No, you're not supposed to.
How about that? Oh, it doesn't pinch?
Well, that's okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry I went ahead and just zoomed out just real quick. Will you zoom back in when I finished with showing some color? Okay, so for my white, I'm going to leave that for later because I do put a little grayness on that. So this shell is a lot of white, but there's some warmer colors. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of the burnt sienna. And for some reason it looks kind of green because I've been painting with this palette, and I did not do a very good job of cleaning my palette. I'm very sorry.
Will you leave the pencil?
Yes, ma'am. Pencil, because it's going to be so much part of the design. It also will help me with my detail. Now, what I tend to see, now, it may be that we would be better off to zoom in a little bit, and I'll just describe the colors. Let's see, there is some pink in here. Let's just do the zoom because I think you can tell the colors I'm using. I'm going to be, most of what I do is quite watery. That this indication of lights and shadows, I begin. So I'm really looking at where these are darker, and this is more gray. I'm pulling out a little bit more warm color in this, and I think you can get away with that because I don't believe you're going to hold your seashells up to your painting and say, "See how perfect I was." You can leave those you can leave the seashells back in the box when you're done, and nobody will know the difference. I am going to put a little grayness to it. And I'm going to keep some highlights on here. And I'm just going to use the small tip of this brush to add some little tiny lines. And yes, if I feel like my pencil lines are a little bit dark because I did that so you could see them better, I might come back. Faith, your question was good, because do you leave the pencil lines? I tend to, yes ma'am. But let's say if you feel like they're a little bit too heavy and it looks more like an illustration than a watercolor painting, then you will want to change that, you know, take your eraser. It's not as easy to erase pencil lines after you have watercolor on top of them, but you can tone it down. It is definitely tonable. Okay, so I'm just giving a little more shadow to that, and I'm going to paint this shadow while I have a touch of that blue, and that was my cerulean blue with a lot of water. And I just wanted this to be, I didn't even clean my brush, so it still had that yellow, almost warm color. So I've created a little bit of a shadow based on what I'm looking at here. And I just popped a little bit of the more blue right there. That could be a bit heavy, but I'm going to leave that. So the next one I'm going to do is this scallop shell, because I think all of you are going to have those rib shells to do. And how I begin that, I do it in layers. And this has a lot of what I would call rose madder or alizarin crimson, almost a maroony red undertone. But there's also a warmness to it. You know, I think I better start with that little bit of warm color. So the warm color is this lighter color here, and I don't do it all over. I just sort of suggest wherever I happen to see it. While I'm doing that little bit of warm color, maybe I need to look at this shell, which also has a little bit of a warmer color. Let's see, it was turned so that you could see the inside there. So we can see that this has
This will look so easy.
this has that, I don't know, it's a tan color. So that under that painting that's there, and wherever you see a lot of white or light, you want to just leave that light. This is pretty light up here. I don't paint over the whole thing. Here, I just happen to feel like this is similar in color too, and I'm going to do, again, keeping that lightness. This helps that round feeling, and it's more of a shadow over here anyway. And just contour a few lines, indicate. I'll come back now and do a lot more work on all of these three. I'm just sort of looking at these three right now. So the next color that I would put for my scallop shell is beginning to look at the reds, and then next the blues. I'm using a little round brush. I thought I'd end up with my flat, but this little brush, it's more about the detail now, so I'll probably use this throughout. And I'm just going to sketch in the lines with a alizarin, and it seems kind of solid through here, but if I create these lines and then come back with the blues, and I'll give this several coats. And here's the other thing. Besides the ribs that we have going on, we also have this little scallopy feeling that goes over.
And what color?
This is alizarin crimson, rose madder. But I think I'm going to put a little burnt sienna with it because it's way too bright. So I just put a little burnt sienna with that. And I'm going to just move across. This takes a little while of observation, and my eyeball is moving back and forth between. It's nice to put the seashell down next to what you're drawing and kind of observe and do your little lines. Sort of move back, go in, move back, and then I'm going to keep going with the darker lines that are here. More of that little alizarin with the burnt sienna. But it certainly is much darker through this part. And I don't want to lose all my light spots. You can get too heavy, so you want to be careful about that. And I do sense a lot of blue, and I'll come in with the blue here in a sec. So I need a purple color. The blue I'm going to use is cobalt on top of that red. However, I have to talk to myself just now, and I forgot. I'm listening. Go ahead, Kathy. Oh yes, don't paint on your blue yet until the red is dry. Okay, and besides, you still have the burnt sienna and the alizarin on your brush. Let's put the stripes on with this. Okay, that's a good idea. So that way I am taking advantage of not overworking something while it's still wet. And now what I want to do is suggest the details that are going on in here. And so this is coming around, and then they tapers to little tiny lines. This is heavier up here. And then it just sort of tapers down. And if it helps you to talk to yourself and say, okay, don't get too heavy right there. And then, but I do see some lines out here. And sometimes the edges just need a little softening. Like that was not a hard edge, so I just put water on my little flat brush and soften that up. I didn't want it to be that hard of an edge. Now also in here, this is a shadow. So this is a lot of pink in there. So that rose madder is what I wanted. Oh, you know, I think I saw more shadow when it was turned the other way. Now I'm painting it upside down, and I remember this being a dark shadow. So I'm going to stick with my memory on that one. But again, I want to soften that edge just a little bit. So it looks like it's, there's also some shading that happens here on this edge. So just by taking the water and softening that, that should help that one too. And then my shadow, that would be the blue. And I'm using the cerulean with a little bit of color that's still on my brush for that shadow. So the shadow should help it to appear to be resting on the surface here. Okay, so that's a little heavy. And sometimes just lifting with a tissue. Okay, so now I'm going to use the blue to do my lines. And I'm back to looking at the little scallop shell. And I see some very, whoops, that's a little heavy. Some very dark lines. Very dark lines. There, I'm talking to myself because I didn't get it dark enough. And the red and blue will kind of make that purple color that you see. You do want to exaggerate your colors just a little bit, because otherwise everything, seashells are going to be a little bit bland. If you see something that has some green in it, exaggerate the green. If it's a yellow, exaggerate the yellow, or orange, or blue, or red, exaggerate it just a little bit. Now, what I wish I had done is left just a little sheen right here. So I take the water so that I get a little light spot there. And I'm going to come back on the blue. And sometimes when I'm all done with something like that, I almost want to go back with my pencil and fix those edges. This could be a bit of a blue, dark blue shadow anyway, so just to make that sit on the table, on the surface. Of course, it's so flat to the table that it's not going to have much of a shadow edge. And when this dries more, I probably will still come back and do a few more of those strokes. And I wouldn't be surprised if I go back with more red and then more blue. But with trying to leave some of that light, now covering it all up. Okay, so that's indicating here. So with the shells gone, you can now see how the seashells are starting to look. And the one thing I would do with the sand dollar, I didn't paint either one of the white ones, and I didn't finish this one, but I use sort of a dull kind of gray to suggest the sand dollar, just to give it, sometimes you can actually see this little mottled pattern on that. And I also do a little ribbing where this little 5-star thing, this pattern that's right here, and when I look at it, I can even see the brushwork going like this. And then it definitely has, and I think the exercise here is really an observation in designing your page, in enjoying the seashells, in making a design that really is pleasant to look at. This shadow will fall a little bit here, just a little dark, a little bit of a dark line, and you will have to make a dark color. And to make a dark color, I use a burnt sienna and a cobalt blue. And I'll just switch this over to so you can see. This is my cobalt blue and this is my burnt sienna. And with those two colors, I can make a very dark color. Now that's not in many of the seashells, but for example, I don't really think it's even that dark, but these are openings. As a matter of fact, it really wouldn't be quite that dark, but maybe it would be dark where the shadow would be. Let's see. The shadow would be down at the bottom. So I'm gonna use a little lifting and just let those openings, let's see, here. Okay, then we'll lighten it. There. There. Okay, now this is not finished, this is just getting started good. What your job will be is to arrange your seashells and to think about your design and work with what you have and keep adding your seashells until you have a finished design. That's our job. So there's also a handout that we can post, and then that way, thank you so much for, that was scary. How's that? Thanks for coming today, and enjoy drawing and painting your seashells.